Right.
Yeah, well done.
You wouldn't believe I've done this before, would you?
Yes.
Right. Come on. There we go. Okay. I'm going to move some of you over a bit so I can see who's with me. Right. I want to try and make this a bit interactive. It's going to be quite difficult to do that in some ways, although there's not shed loads of us here, so we should be able to kind of communicate a little bit. One of the questions, well, the question I'm hoping that we kind of address today is it arrogant to believe that Jesus is the only way to God? What is unique about Christianity amongst world religions? All of those kind of things, all of those kind of questions that we're asking, particularly in the society that we're living today. You know, the society which we're living in today asks us to be tolerant, asks us to kind of embrace other views and things like that. Is the exclusive claims of Christianity, they don't lend themselves so well to that. But I wonder if we can kind of navigate a way a little bit through that. I'll show you a picture of the elephant, and the kind of, if you like, the belief that all religions lead to God is called religious pluralism. Okay, and religious pluralists very often will bring out an elephant and lots of blind people. And it's a parable based on a Hindu text. And it basically says, when it's done in this context of religious pluralism, it basically says that these blind people all represent other world religions. The elephant is trotted in, and you know, one of them is touching the ear, and he says it's a fan. One of them is touching the tusks, and he says it's a spear. Someone else is touching the trunk, and they say it's a snake, and it goes on and on and on. The point it's obviously making is that this is part of their reality. They don't see the overall picture, and then the kind of dogma is trotted out. Well, this is religious pluralism. You know, religions have something to offer, but they don't see the complete story. Now, I'll be coming back to this because I think personally this is quite flawed as an example of things. But I do think the kind of claims of Christianity do kind of lend themselves to various questions. So I'll open it up if that's okay. You can unmute yourselves. Feel free to do that, unless something goes off in the background and you feel suddenly you need to mute yourself again. But what do you think of the kind of questions raised about the uniqueness of Jesus being the only way, all of those kind of things? What issues? I mean, if you've had conversations with friends, what issues are raised?
I've got one.
Yeah.
So I've got really good friends who say that I'm only a Christian because of an accident of birth. If I'd been born in the Middle East, I'd be a Muslim.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anything else? What about the claim that Jesus is the only way? I mean, how do people react to that?
They think it's arrogant.
Okay, so a lot of people would see it as arrogance.
And they ask what the basis is for it.
Okay, what's the basis for it? These are all kind of good questions. Do you ever encounter people who have a feeling that all religions have something to offer?
Yes.
And we should have this kind of this religious pluralism. It is something that does exist, should exist, and we should be a bit more tolerant of. Do you get people with those kind of thoughts?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well,
I mean, the big one, Dave, also is what about people who haven't had the chance to hear?
Okay, and there's a pastoral element to that, isn't there? Definitely. I mean, you could translate that into kind of other groups who are never going to get the opportunity to hear and things like that because of circumstances and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I want us to really primarily this morning just focus on that whole question: is religious pluralism a good way forward? Is it something that should be embraced? You know, or are the claims that Jesus is the only way, made by Jesus himself, something that we can explain in a way that helps people embrace the gospel? So I've got a couple of questions that I want us to ask. What's unique about Christianity among the world religions? What do you feel are some of the issues in saying that Jesus is the only way? How do you address those issues? So those are kind of some of the questions that I want us to kind of look at a little bit this morning. And I'm aware we've got sort of 25 minutes, so we're not going to this is going to be an ongoing discussion probably, but I want us to kind of look at this. Okay, I think there are three main reasons why people embrace religious pluralism. Okay, I really believe that there are three main reasons, and I've encountered lots of people who embrace religious pluralism. When I say Jesus is the only way to God, I'm often asked the question, well, why? I've had the opportunity to meet, know, and talk with both Christians and non-Christians who I would regard as pluralists, and I've reflected on these conversations. And it seems to me that, as I say, there are at least three reasons people embrace religious pluralism. The first is they consider it to be enlightened. You know, we're living in an age where where people think it's a little bit narrow, it's a little bit dogmatic, it's a little bit conservative just to believe in one of these things. Let's embrace everything. Is that fair? We're living in this kind of, let's embrace everybody, arms out wide and things like that. Let's be more enlightened. Another reason is that they believe religious pluralism is more humble. It has a more attitude. Every religion has something to offer. It sounds incredibly humble. And another thing is they regard it as more tolerant, and we're living in a tolerant, a tolerant society, aren't we? So let's have a look at these three reasons, and feel free if you want to interrupt, okay? Because I mean, the nature of this is, I'd like you to interrupt. Don't feel you're being rude or anything like that, okay? If we don't get through what I prepared, that's no problem. All right? You happy with that?
Okay.
Yeah.
In going through, you said these are three reasons to be for pluralism. There's also probably another three reasons, which are quite, you're going to unpack those about contradictions between them and stuff like that.
Yeah, we'll be unpacking that, Phil. Has anyone else just had a leave breakout rooms thing come up?
Yes.
Yes.
Well,
Yes.
that didn't feel like half an hour, did it?
No.
I think we're being summoned back and then we're going to be summoned out again. Let's see what's happening.
It's supposed to be back wrong, or has it gone wrong?
Sorry, I can't have set it right. I'll open them all again. Hang on a minute.
Okay, you're back with me again. Welcome back. Right, okay. Welcome back. Have I got to share the screen again? I have, haven't I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't technology wonderful? Okay, so three reasons why people embrace religious pluralism. And religious pluralism, as we've as we've said, is the belief that all religions lead to God. They believe it to be more enlightened, they believe it to be humble, and they believe it to be more tolerant. Okay, and I want to look at those things one by one. I'm happy to be interrupted by people. I'm happy for us not to get through all our kind of material, or all the material I prepared. Okay, so if you want to interrupt, just unmute yourself and please make a contribution. I appreciate it's difficult to do online, but let's try our best. Okay, first of all, let's unpack the word enlighten. To enlighten someone means to explain something clearly to them. If your friend is behaving strangely but insists she has a reason for it, you ask her to enlighten you. Enlightenment comes from the metaphor that ignorance is a state of being in the dark and that knowledge is illuminating. So it's fundamentally about truth. So we ask ourselves then the question, is religious kind of pluralism enlightening? Is the belief that all religious paths lead to the same God more enlightened, more educated? Well, first thing you've got to say is comparatively, each religion teaches very different things about God. And it teaches very different things about how humans reach the divine. There's tons of disagreement between the religions regarding the nature of God. If you look at Buddhism, for example, Buddhism doesn't believe in God. Islam teaches an impersonal monotheism. Allah, the Quran, states that God reveals his will, but not his person. Christianity teaches a personal Trinitarianism, where God is three persons in relationship, Father, Son, and Spirit. And they can be known because of the work of Jesus and what he's done. Hinduism varies on the question. Hinduism varies from kind of ranging from polytheism, a belief in loads of gods, to atheism. And part of the reason it believes this range of things is because there's an absence of a definite revelation to clarify Hindu theology. So it has multiple sources of revelation, contrary to Islam. Hinduism has no presuppositions about the nature of God. And so, in short, kind of religious views of God, they differ. And they differ in such a way that it seems far from enlightened to claim that all religions lead to the same God, when their views of God are in fact so radically different. The claim of religious pluralism, that all kind of religions map a route towards the divine, contradict the very tenets of the religions themselves. Religions not only teach different things about who God is, but also how we reach him. Buddhism suggests the eightfold noble path. Islam, the 5 pillars. Christianity, the good news, the gospel of Jesus. So to say that all religions lead to God is not only unenlightened, it's inaccurate. Stephen Prefero, an author, he's written a book, and he writes this: it's comforting to pretend that the great religions make up one big happy family. But this sentiment, however well-intentioned, is neither accurate nor ethically responsible. He goes on to point that just as God is not one, so also all religions are not one. They're distinct. They make very different claims about God and how to reach him. In the light of what we have observed regarding what religions teach about the nature of God and how to reach him, religious pluralism has got to be reconsidered, I think. Subscribing to religious pluralism because it's more enlightened or it's a more educated view of world religions is not only unenlightened, but it's also inaccurate. Any comments on that? Are you all happy with that so far?
i.e. they contradict each other.
They do. So they're saying very radically different things. So to try and embrace and to try and kind of say that they all lead to the divine, when they're all offering totally different things. And some of, as I say, some religions don't even believe in the divine. So, you know, to try and lump them all together is misleading. And it doesn't allow for those distinctive claims within it. It may make us feel a bit better, but it's just not being true to the kind of facts that that are there. Okay, is religious pluralism more humble? I won't give you a definition of humble because you guys are all humble, so you all know what that definition is. Okay.
Dave, may I
Yeah.
say something?
Yeah, go for it.
One of the things about Christianity is that it's the only religion that Jesus reaches out to us.
Yeah, I agree, and we're going to come to that as well, Liz. You're right.
Oh, sorry, I'm jumping the gun. Sorry.
No, I'm happy for you to jump the gun. I mean, obviously, in all other religions, there is an attempt to get to the divine. There's instructions about how to get to divine.
Yeah, and they're stabbing in the dark, aren't they? Because they're not getting any response.
If that religion is, you know, is attempting to do that, so there are things. There are instructions given to try and help that to happen. Christianity is about God getting involved in our lives. Christianity is about God coming to us, getting his hands dirty. And we'll look at that. We will be looking at that. So, but again, there is this view out there that it's not a very humble thing to say, you know, that your religion is the only way to God. But as I pointed out, there are very clear differences on the nature of God and human access to the divine. Religious pluralists, they continue to insist that there are many ways to God. So you ask yourself, well, why would educated people persist in an inaccurate view of other religions? And one major reason is because they believe it to be an act of humility. They believe it to be an act of love. And I've heard, again and again, very often people say, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge someone else's religion, to tell them that they're wrong? Now, that question is a bit of a loaded question. It implies, of course, that maintaining Jesus is the only way to God is arrogant. And, you know, I'd be the first to admit there are plenty of arrogant Christians out there who rudely insist that Jesus is the only way to God. I think an arrogant insistence of your belief actually runs counter to the life and teachings of Jesus. However, just because someone is arrogant doesn't make them wrong. I was thinking of a person who I could think of who would be a good example of that. For some reason, I came up with Piers Morgan. Piers Morgan, he's an arrogant toad, isn't he? But sometimes he's right. People can be arrogantly right about all kinds of things, maths, science, religion. You know, you've probably worked with someone or associated with someone who can be a bit like that. You know, they can be arrogantly, but sometimes they are right. The arrogantly right person talks down to others with an air of arrogance because they have the right answer. Now, that's not nice and that's not good and that's not helpful, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. For all the Christians who are arrogant about Jesus' exclusive claims, there are many more who have searched religions, compared their claims, and humbly come to the conclusion that Jesus was telling the truth. That personal faith in the Messiah is the only way to God. That doesn't make them arrogant. That makes them authentic. They're willing to stand by what they discovered to be true. Insisting on what is true doesn't automatically make you arrogant. There are both humble and arrogant ways to insist on Jesus' claim that he is the only way to God. I mean, Jesus made these claims, and I think most people would agree that Jesus was, you know, one of the most humble guys that ever lived. By contrast, religious pluralism exclusively insists that all ways lead to God. You know, they insist that that's true, while all other religions are false in their exclusive teachings. You could argue that that's quite an arrogant assumption. I'll take you back to our elephant. Okay, you've got our elephant. You've got the kind of all the people who are blind touching bits of the elephant, the ear, and it's a fan, and the tusk, and it's a spear. Who's the only person who's not blind? The only person who's not blind is the religious pluralist. All these other poor religions are just flapping around, trying to get, you know, an idea of what's real and things like that. But the religious pluralism, you know, he can see, and he can see where all the other religions kind of fell. Now, to me, that sounds a little bit arrogant. The only sighted person in that scenario, the religious pluralist, everyone else blind and fumbling around. Religious pluralism dogmatically insists on its exclusive claim, namely that all roads lead to God. Now, the problem, as we've seen, is that that claim directly contradicts many religions. Well, practically all religions, Islam, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, all make unique claims. The claim of the religious pluralist is arrogant because it enforces its own beliefs on others. It says to others religions, you must believe what I believe, not what you believe. Your way isn't right. In fact, all of your ways are wrong and my ways are right. There isn't just one way to God. There are many ways. You are wrong and I'm right. And that's incredibly arrogant from a place which is, so say, being humble, particularly if the person saying this hasn't studied all the world religions, makes a blind assertion. On what basis can the religious pluralism make that exclusive claim? Where's the proof that this is true? What ancient scripture traditions, careful reasoning can they point to? There's a lack of historical and rational support for religious pluralism. It feels comfortable. It feels humble, but it's a highly untenable view of the world and its religions. So is religious pluralism more humble? No, I don't think it is. In fact, I think, you know, it shows itself up to be arrogant because of its insistence on asking the major religions to abandon their things, and, you know, you're all leading it to the same way. Anyone got a comment?
Yeah, the trouble is that whilst the difficulty we have is that we do not know, because we're in our three-dimensional world, we don't know which ones lead to God. We experience it, and we obviously experience God through the Holy Spirit as a Christian. What we don't know, because we don't come back from the dead, is whether the other religions might also result in eternal life. So the difficulty of something like pluralism is that it can be very unhelpful. For example, if you went to a doctor and you said, oh, my friends told me to do this, the doctor doesn't say, oh, that might be okay. He's more likely to say, no, that's really unhelpful. So that's quite arrogant. And so we end up with this difficult situation where if we're just very humble and say, oh yeah, anything goes, actually we're not being helpful, but actually we don't know, because we haven't died and come back to life again into this world, whether our way that we have elected is the way. But obviously what we do know is that the reason we're in this world is to work out whether we get into the next one.
Yeah, I think, and part of that is based on our understanding and our appreciation of the exclusive claims of Jesus, who has died and come back and has proclaimed himself the only way. So again, we've got that balance between what we believe and what we understand as an exclusive claim coming from someone we know and we trust. And also that kind of dynamic as well of God. And again, Liz is right, it's uniqueness in Christianity, God actually getting involved in our lives rather than sending us a sacred text to point us towards him. He's getting involved and he's saying, follow me, very much in this human form that we understand Jesus to be. So if you like, if I'm making an arrogant claim, it's on the basis of the claims that Jesus has made as someone I trust, as someone I love, as someone I follow. Religious pluralism, it just gives me this smorgasbord, and it kind of lowers everything to its kind of common denominator. Now that might be fine for the kind of spirit of the age, but it doesn't necessarily help me, as you kind of pointed out. What about tolerance? Is religious pluralism more tolerant? You know, very often, and this is the biggie in the society in which we're living, very often people hold to religious pluralism because they think it's more tolerant than Christianity. And I'll be the first to say that we need tolerance. But what does it mean to be tolerant? I think there's been a disservice to the word. To be tolerant is to accommodate difference. It's not to blot out the difference or rub out the differences. It's to accommodate the difference. And I think that can be a very noble thing. I believe that Christians should be some of the most accommodating kinds of people. They should give, and they do give, everyone the dignity to believe whatever they want. They shouldn't enforce their beliefs on others. We should engage in conversation. We should be good at telling people why we do what we do. Religious pluralism doesn't really allow, I don't think, for that kind of tolerance. Instead of accommodating spiritual differences, it blunts them. Religious pluralism blunts them. The claim that all paths lead to the same God actually minimizes other religions by asserting another religious claim. When someone says all paths lead to the same God, they blunt the distinctions between religions. They throw them all in the one pot, saying, see, they all get us to God, so the differences don't really matter. I don't think that's tolerance. I think that's a power play. When a certain all religions lead to God, the distinctive and very different views of God and how to reach the divine, and I'll throw in the major religions between Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam, they're all brushed aside in one powerful swoop, you know. The Eightfold Noble Plan, the 5 pillars of Islam, the gospel of Christ. They're not tolerated, but they're told to submit to a new religious claim, religious pluralism, despite the fact that this isn't what those religions teach. And when it does that, religious pluralism places itself on top of all the other religions. It's the one that can see. All these other guys are just blind. They're just fumbling around. But religious pluralists can see. It's an elephant, you know? And I think people spend years studying and practicing their religious distinctions. To say they don't really matter is pretty intolerant. The very notion of religious tolerance assumes that there are differences. There are differences to tolerate, but pluralism is intolerant of those differences. So in that sense, religious pluralism is a religion of its own. It has religious absolutes. All paths lead to God. It requires people of other faiths to embrace this absolute without any religious backing at all. Religious pluralism is preachy, but it's under the guise of tolerance. In the end, it's a step of faith to say there are many paths to God. Says who, you know? The idea that all paths lead to the same God is not a self-evident fact. It's a leap of faith. It isn't even an educated leap. It isn't humble and tolerant as it might appear. Again, I'll give you Stephen Puffer. Faith in the unity of religions is just that, faith. Perhaps even a kind of fundamentalism. And the leap that gets us there is an act of hyperactive imagination. So, you know, each of these reasons for subscribing to religious pluralism, enlightenment, humility, tolerance, I think they all backfire. I think they don't follow through. Religious pluralism isn't enlightened, it's inaccurate. It isn't humble, it's dogmatic. It isn't really tolerant because it intolerantly blunts religious distinctions. Right, as I kind of predicted, we haven't really got anywhere in terms of some of the stuff I've prepared. But you know, I do think, you know, in a society where we need to kind of think about these things and we need to think about the exclusive claims that Jesus made, we do